I, too, sing, America. I am the darker sister. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh, eat well, and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I, too, sing America. I, too, a poem by Harlem Renaissance artist, poet, playwright, novelist, Mr. Langston Hughes, is the classic literary work that saved my life as a teacher and the life that was almost non-existent in my classroom during the time of COVID-19, also known as the pandemic years. Globally, we were all brought together, the human race, through the shared experience. But there's irony in this, because we were farther apart, more distant, and more divided. Personally, I was struggling at a Quaker day and boarding high school where I served as a teacher of English at the time. I struggled because the values that led and kept me there at that point, about 8 years, no longer looked or felt the same during the pandemic. The core Quaker values are known as the SPICES, an acronym which stands for simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. Now, while all 6 spices are significant, community, as I came to understand it and deeply appreciate it, was becoming more and more dismantled while teaching my students, now distant learners, in my sophomore literature and composition course. The community that was once vibrant, students with their hands raised, asking questions, reading, writing, laughing, stopping by my classroom to say hello, receiving and giving hugs, now look like this, my empty classroom. Conversations about courses, essay writing guidance, and all else that took place during one-on-one consultations in person now look like this. My understanding of community as the foundation, the glue, making it possible for the deeper connections formed through in-person learning was in disarray. To add to the global crises and how it continued to affect my little part of the world, there were the politics around vaccines, the illness resulting in a massive death toll, the civil and racial unrest after we all witnessed what happened to George Floyd. The protest, it went on and on and on. My students and I were emotionally exhausted and depleted at times. I was used to being the adult in the room, but there were times when I connected most to the students who attended class in their beds, their heads covered underneath their blankets. And while I tried to encourage them to remain awake, present, and with their cameras turned on, I sometimes wanted to curl up underneath my own blanket and turn my camera off just to give my blurry, tired eyes a break from staring at computer screens for hours on end. It became increasingly more difficult to find meaning in what was once most meaningful during the lesson planning process. One day, while I was teaching a lesson about essay outlining, a student shared a message in the chat asking if they could be excused from class because they lost a family member to COVID. They had trouble concentrating on the lesson. My lesson plan, centered on the essay writing process, turned into an unplanned lesson, a much needed and deeper conversation about how our personal lives were affected by COVID and other current events, how we were coping. Another most pivotal moment took place during that same lesson when a student asked, "Shantel, how are you doing? How are you holding up through all this?" Before that moment, I had never even thought to share with my students how I was personally holding up. I was most concerned about how they were holding up, their well-being, most concerned about teaching them most effectively based on the new resources, tools, and protocols. There was no choice but to learn and follow. But when that student asked about how I was doing, whatever I was doing in that moment to hold myself together all fell apart. The floodgates opened. That question became my permission to shed tears. And I shed many of them. I think I shed tears not only for myself, I shed tears for my students, for my family, for their families. There were so many tears. I think I shed tears for humanity in that moment. And finally, when I regained my composure, I responded to that question about how I was doing, how I was holding up, and said, I'm not sure. The unplanned lesson led to a place of deep reflection, where my stream of consciousness sounded something like this: this is not sustainable. I'm burnt. This is not why I became a teacher in the first place. I have nothing left to give. I'm done. That dialogue played over and over in my head like a loop, like a broken record, until I had no choice but to go back to the drawing board of why I became a teacher in the first place. Community, an in-person learning environment, connection with students through discussion about literature, the love of reading, writing, poetry. It took many dark days of feeling through the room before finding the switch that turned my light on again. And I'm so, so very grateful for my students who led me there, and thankful for Langston Hughes's poem, I Too, when I looked for a work by an author. It reflected the social injustices of their time. Hughes's I Too gives voice to the marginalized, asks readers to reflect on who and what is America, and centers on how authors and artists like those of the Harlem Renaissance used their voice as vehicles for social change. The unplanned lesson was precisely what my students and I needed at the time to make sense of the feelings of despair and helplessness we felt during the pandemic. And today, Langston Hughes' I Too means something slightly different than it did during that time. But the poem continues to be very much relevant. Now, I'm still a teacher at the same Quaker Day and boarding high school where I served as a teacher of English during the pandemic. And I'm happy to report that today I stand more strengthened with an in-person community and so grateful for that day when my lesson plan didn't go as planned. Thank you.